And so first, I'm going to introduce Jimmy Freeze. He's the CEO of AI Fish, and he's going to talk about what is AI and what can it do for me. So please welcome him.
Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming to our session. I'm Jimmy Freeze. I work at AI Fish. I'm going to talk about artificial intelligence and what it can do for us, and similarly along the themes of what Justin talked about, sort of questions to ask, and hopefully arm us with a start of some information that can ask the right things and kind of go. So some terminology, I'll try not to get too in the weeds, but there's a few kind of terms that float around that I'm sure you've all heard about. I'll focus on natural language processing, which I think we've all kind of heard about, ChatGPT and related products that kind of handle language and do that. And then there's computer vision, which runs on sometimes similar algorithms, but it's sort of what it says. Takes a look at imagery and video and gives you information there, some analysis. So machine learning is, a few terms are thrown around. We like the one that sort of basically describes algorithms that improve over time. So you have an algorithm, you train it on a data set, and then you improve it, you get another version, and then you keep improving that way. So as you guys probably have heard that AI guys love data, and that's why, those big blue things. And deep learning is more complex algorithms that use sort of neural networks is the term that are used, but basically the way to think about this is you have information that comes in, you have weights, you do some multiplication, a lot of linear algebra, and then you get an output. And then you string 25 million of these together and you might get some decent results. And natural language processing is sort of, you guys are familiar with chatbots and, like I said, ChatGPT. And so that's sort of, in a sense, the term you may come across is tokenizing. So it'll tokenize a word or part of a word and sort of stick those together. And that would be how that's sort of processed. And the focus, obviously, is language, unlike what we do, which is vision. So here's an example of a vision algorithm in which we have a few things going on. We have high confidence in people detection, bikes and streets and trees. All the colors are what we refer to as segmentation. So it kind of blobs out one thing, like the road that they're riding on or the sky. In this example, we're looking at things that have been trained on a lot. People, roads. You've all heard of self-driving cars. They have a huge amount of data. In our world, in fishing, there isn't a lot of people that have wrenched hard on finding out what an obscure gray snapper really looks like and giving thousands and thousands of examples, whereas there's millions and millions. So fishing, those are some of the challenges. We just don't have data. Another example what we do is we annotate all of our humans ourselves. Like we've kind of found that you can't just take an off-the-shelf model. Just because you can see a bunch of people in a shopping mall or walking down a street doesn't mean you can see guys fishing on a boat with foul weather gear, half on, half off hood. You know, regular people don't run around in bright orange suits. So that's sort of the difference as to how you kind of delve into the problem. So here's a couple examples. FishBrain is an application in which brings in data such as sort of weather, past catch, and we kind of use this one because it's reasonably simple and it has to do with fish. And you have a machine learning model. So fishermen would sort of log where their sort of the fish happens and where they've caught a fish, some weather and some other data that might get kind of put in there, and then maybe we'll find some patterns as to the likelihood of catching a fish and maybe what kind. So that's an example of a machine learning model in fishing. In aquaculture, you have you can use machine learning to basically optimize food and when and how much to release. So you're getting information. The feedback loop is information of the fish, how big they are, and their size and their population. So aquaculture biomass problem. That's all I hear from them. And you get a machine learning model, saves money, food's there. I think it's half their cost. This related to like e-logbooks and even sort of data analysis and aggregation is something where, so this example would sort of be using natural language processing, a product like ChatGPT or Claude or something like those, to then sort of help you sift through this sort of mountain of data and maybe even help you quickly find something by talking to it in regular language. So you wanted to look at certain events quickly through a logbook. Even some of the tools are approaching usable level where you could sort of tell it to take all this data and make it pretty, put it in a little chart, put it presentable, that kind of thing. So that's, it's one of these things that could save you 15 minutes of work or 4 hours. We will see how this plays out, but our view is the way the tools look like they're going, this could be something that could be incorporated even in sort of small devices at some point in the near future. So what we do at AI Fish, and if you went to Justin's talk, he touched on some of this work, but so this would be on the left, traditional computer vision, or not traditional, but the computer vision we do, where we analyze a video that we've been given, and you see there's people, we're tracking people, we're tracking that fish, and that's the boxes. And then there's confidence levels as to what's around them. So our confidence goes down when we can only see a small fraction of the fish, but when we see the whole fish, it goes up, and makes sense. In trawl monitoring, it's a little different. You see all those little dots, and those dots represent sort of the fish, and that would be dealing with a large pile of fish and handling that versus one by one in the long line guys. Sonar, river fish, salmon are a popular fish that this would be something where you set up a sonar device, shoot it across sort of a river, and then count the things that go by. And that's using sonar underwater. And that's similar to the idea as far as algorithmically is pretty similar to what you're seeing on the left here, which is there's a box, there's a fish, and it's moving. Let's keep track of it. And then also in a point-related sort of application be seals. So we did a project in Antarctica where we had camera traps, and they wanted to figure out how many seals there were, when they were there, and sort of what kind. So you have pups and you have male and female, and so that would be sort of like, again, looking at a population. In real world terms, they do that with sort of like crowd analysis. That would be sort of a people thing. How many people are in this room? How many people are awake? That kind of thing. So here's another example of the same scene we just saw, where what we want to point out here is some of the difficulties of dealing with what we call occlusion, or people getting in the way of what we're really wanting to focus on, which in this case would be this fish. And so, again, you see part of it, you don't see the whole thing. So the algorithms sort of pick up on what we call key points or key parts on the fish, and then sort of make a determination. In this case, marlin type fish are a little easier than, small obscure ones. But the difficulty that we want to point out here is recounting, and in this case, like we worked with an open source piece of software, we kind of benchmark tested it, and it's a difficult problem. So in this case, it's 14 fish versus really in actuality 1. So that's something we've spent a huge amount of time working on, and we have you have little ghost tracks of boxes that just kind of look like they're moving around in space, but there's actually a fish behind there. In this case, you can see the fish. We've also worked with Alaska on a fixed gear project, so that's also sort of fish coming in a sense, one by one. And that one, our proof of concept was, we were pretty happy with the results of saving review time 40 to 50%. So in this case, sort of, what can AI do for me? And with not a lot of work, but the right pointed amount of data and putting it in the right direction, you can save a fair amount of review time if the process is thought through coming into it. And in this one, we're just getting started. When we get to the species level, we're going to probably make that number a lot bigger. This is a nice example. This is a SmartPass project. Chris Cusack, EDF, has worked with us a lot on this one, in which it's just a box with a camera and a little computer, and all the processing is done right there, shooting across sort of inlets and counting boats. So it's a really kind of low-level, easy statistical way of figuring out how many boats are coming out, how many boats come back in, and we're still gathering, data as we stick these things out there to figure out sort of interesting statistical anomalies that we might see over time with something like this. So, and then that's a really sort of low-cost solution, because the amount of sort of identification and object identification is pretty minimal, in the sense that all we were asked to do is just detect a boat. So the next stages might be what kind of boat, how big, but we'll see. We'll ask Chris about that. And here's an example of trawl fishing that we are working with Government of Canada, and this would be sort of, I think, important when you work with an AI team, is to figure out how well they can do their algorithmic work, how well they can do their analysis, because if they can't do that well, you're going to get junk results. After you get results, is how well can they be presented to me, and how easy can I get what I need to get, and is there a clean, easy way in which we can be presented what we want, we can find what we want. I want to see this clip, I don't want to spend 20 minutes looking for it, I know what I want. So that's what we built there. And that's it. Thanks, you guys. Appreciate it.
Jimmy, do you want to stay for maybe 1 or 2 questions? I think we have time for a couple questions if anybody has any.
Are there any questions? Fire away. Come on.
I have a question about the data limitation problem, and I feel like a lot of people talked about the idea of shared video libraries, but there's also the approach where individual AI developers are getting sort of their own proprietary set of video data and working off that. Do you have a view of what is the best way forward, and what you've seen in other industries on how to get that data set, and what's the best way forward?
Yeah, everybody here, write to your senator and your representative about amending America's MSA. Marine, so what that is that's just a NOAA thing in which we're handcuffed. So it's a NOAA thing in which data on private commercial, in this case vessels or someone's store, and then data of other people can only kind of be in the NOAA sphere. So related to anything that happens in America, that's sort of tricky, but this is not uncommon with our Australian friends or our Canadian friends. So our view is, yes, it would be nice if it was easier to get data, but that's a policy thing. I was asked a question yesterday about what is probably our biggest pain point, and I think Eric mentioned people, and I kind of went on our side, which was people in policy and that stuff. So yeah, you're not going to see without a good amount of sharing of data and stuff. We did work with TNC on the FishNet project, and that's just imagery. And in our counterpart to TNC, and we've talked that needs to be kind of stepped up, or pushed. It could be pushed further. As we all know, the difficulty is which boats are going to sign up, raise their hand, let us put a bunch of equipment on there, and then let us put our stuff on the internet, and cross their fingers that the stuff that they don't want gets out there. So that's the challenge. I hear your data problem question loud and clear. Eric?
Thanks, Eric Tam. I know that my understanding is that the automation for electronic monitoring can be very well on one particular boat, but you're essentially training the algorithm for a specific vessel. And my understanding is the holy grail is to create one universal algorithm so you can just put it on any vessel and there'll be detection. So I guess one of my question for you is, do you think the industry, the tech industry, will be able to create kind of a universal algorithm so you don't have to retrain the algorithms for every single individual vessel? And if that's the case, how far away is this? Is it going to take 3 years more of development, or 10 years, or?
A couple of years maybe, depending on what you mean by, we can't stick a long line out. We can bunch them together. So we have the point clouds, and then we have one by one fish being dragged across the deck. We just don't see, for us right now, our focus has been on, well, this boat isn't going to pick up a pile of fish and dump it on it, so we don't need that algorithm on the vessel or in the cloud where we analyze it. But there was something you said that I wanted to, that was more important than what I just said. Here, what we've done is I'll give you an example. One of the projects we worked on with our SBIR grant with NOAA is yielded results where on the long line boats that we have trained and we've kind of data in a sense have worked with, we can get about 88% accuracy in our counts of what we're doing there. A new boat comes on and that drops to the mid-70s. And then once we feed that new boat back into the loop, then we'll get back into that 80s, low 90s area. So that's sort of our experience. But I would say it wouldn't be too long where we should be in a position where you could grab something. We're pretty much already there. Grab something long line and basically plug it into something else and get something useful, and be happy with it, but then be able to also improve. But,
So do you think that every vessel, 70%, 80% of the algorithm might be the same, but then you have to retrain it a little bit, so every vessel might have kind of its own little boutique algorithm?
No, we don't. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't go vessel to vessel, but you would just want more vessels. So you'd want more sort of, you just want more range. It would be junk if we had 25 vessels and 22 of them are green. The thing would start, and then that kind of thing. Or even with, some of the data sets, if you find out that you've got a bias towards a certain type of fish, and the algorithm's guessing, it's going to be like, oh yeah, that's a big eye, even though you find that if it's not too sure, it'll lean towards the one it thinks previously it's all 75% of. So our solution there is more data. So back to the data problem. But no, you wouldn't. Our approach is sort of algorithmic work and AI models for each type of fishing. So, for example, if we did something, we haven't done a per se project yet, but if we've done something with them, that would be very, very close modeling to what we're doing in trawl, depending on the requirements. But it's not custom for everything. How are we on time?
Cool, thanks for the questions. Yeah.
Any more, anything? Okay, thanks guys.
Okay, awesome, thanks Jimmy. Yeah, maybe a slightly nerdier answer to that question, Eric, would be, machine learning models are kind of, I mean, they are models, and they're models of the data that you've shown it. And so if you've shown it, you know, a diverse enough data set that it captures every possible thing you could possibly see, then if you have a new image, it's also going to fall into that sort of visual distribution, and it's going to probably do pretty well. But as soon as you have something that's different from what you've trained on, it breaks down. And that actually kind of leads pretty nicely into the next talk. Can I just advance this, or do we need to swap the? Oh. Can we go to the next slideshow, please? Awesome. Okay, cool. So this one's going to be a bit more technical. I'm going to talk about math a little bit. So the overarching theme is, how do we evaluate these things? Like, let's say we've developed a model. How do we say how well it's doing? And so the motivation is really to avoid running into this scenario. A new company comes on the scene, the awesome AI company, and they say, our EM model is 99% accurate at classifying and counting your fish. And you think, great, okay, we'll take it. We sign up. You run it on your data, and it does horrible. So it thinks that this guy's head is afloat. It thinks that part of the boat is a yellowfin tuna, and thinks there's a shark. And so clearly whatever they've used to say our model is 99% accurate does not apply to your data. Okay, so how do we avoid this happening? How do we avoid this scenario? And we're going to walk through the FishNet data set, which was brought up earlier, as kind of a case study for how we can design better tests for systems in order to say more confidently and more realistically how accurate they are. So FishNet is a data set that the Nature Conservancy put together. It's pretty amazing. It's the largest open source EM data set out there, something like 500,000 annotations. We came in after they had collected and annotated all the data to turn it into a machine learning benchmark. And so a benchmark expands from a data set into evaluation. So we have all this raw data. Now we've put boxes around all the fish and all the people. And turning it into a benchmark means we decide which data you use to train the model, which data you use to test the model, and what evaluation metric you use to say how well the model is doing. And so by designing better benchmarks, we can get a fair comparison between methods. So if multiple people were to test their model on the FishNet benchmark, following the protocol that we laid out, we would be able to compare their results head to head. Whereas if people have their own data set and they say, oh, well, I'm 99% accurate on my data set, and you say, well, I'm 99% accurate on my data set, how do you know which is actually better? Are any of them good? And so to describe how we went about making the benchmark, I'll just kind of first go over what developing, training, and testing a machine learning model looks like. So it's typically an iterative process. You have a training data set, which is actually the images that are shown to the model. The model makes predictions on them, you tell it where it's wrong, and then it optimizes over time to get better. Typically then you hold out some data to every once in a while test how the algorithm's doing on things that it's not seen before. If you were to just test it on the training data itself, machine learning models are very good at just literally memorizing data. And so you're trying to combat this problem where you show it some training data, it memorizes it, it gets it 100% correct, but then as soon as you have any new data, it doesn't do well. And so that model's basically not useful. And so we call this intermittent testing validation. And so we hold out what we call a validation set, which is this top right box. We train the model over time. We maybe tweak some settings to get the best performance on this held out data, because we think that gives us an idea of the performance in the real world. And then at the very end, we maybe have another set of data that we hold out that is our like test set that we've never tuned any parameters for. And that gives us like a real clear picture of how it should perform on data where we don't know what's in that set at all. And so how do we know that we can trust even these held out data? It's actually a bit more complicated than just randomly selecting some images to hold out. That still might not give you a very good idea of the performance. And kind of the obvious one would be, oh, well, what if my held out data set is just an exact replica of the training set? Now you haven't really done anything useful. And so in particular, if you use just a normal machine learning library, this is scikit-learn. It's like a very common Python machine learning library. They have a single built-in method called build train test split. So it splits your data into training data and testing data by randomly selecting it. And in the next few slides, I'm going to say why that's a bad idea and doesn't tell you anything about how your model's doing. Don't do it. Specifically, I'm going to focus on a problem called data leakage. So this is especially important in EM, or really like any video-based problem. Video, if you separate a video into image frames that you use to train a model, these images are not independent, right? They come from a set period of time. This is actually a sequence of multiple frames taking place over the course of like half a second. Okay, so in particular, if you were to do your split like this, and my slide got a little messed up, but like if you were to take 1, 3, 4, and 6 and train your model on them, and then evaluate your model on the middle 2 frames, you can essentially memorize the 4 frames, right? Because they were sourced from the same second of video, they look exactly the same. So you could essentially get 100% accuracy on your validation by just memorizing the training data. And we would call this data leakage because the data has leaked from your training set into your testing set. And so now your test metrics no longer give you a realistic picture of how well your model does. And so this would be one way that the awesome AI company could tell us that they're 100% accurate, but really we have no idea how good their model is. It could be good, but according to evaluation on this validation set, we have no idea. And so what we can do to avoid this is always keep video sequences together in either the training set or the testing set, right? So now there's no sort of non-independence between training data and testing data. Now you've kept things together, and this is exactly what we've done for the fishnet benchmark. So this was one thing that we really kept in mind, that all video sequences should go together so that there's no leakage. There's other kinds of non-independence that maybe are okay. So that one particular example where you've just randomly sampled frames from a video is kind of extreme, and we don't want that. Like Eric was saying, though, if you train on data from one vessel, it is non-independent from other data from that vessel. But that's okay, right? Like we want to be able to train our model on data from this vessel from the year 2023, and then we want that vessel to keep fishing, and in 2024 we want it to keep doing well on data from that boat. Okay, so that kind of non-independence is okay. It's something to keep in mind because the data from that boat is more sort of in the distribution of data that the model was trained on, and so you can expect to do better on it. We kind of kept both of these in mind when we're building out the training and testing sets for fishnet. Specifically, these are two kind of different cases, right? Where you have a boat that's in the training set, also in the testing set, maybe footage from different years. That's something that we want to know. We want to know, okay, if we collect some data from this boat, how well can we do on it? Similarly, though, we want to know if we onboard new customers, how well are we going to do on their data? And so what we did is we designed a validation and testing set that have 50% data from one of these scenarios and 50% from another. So the validation and testing sets each are kind of 50-50 old boats, new boats. So we can split that up and we can say our model does this well on vessels that we already have data from and this well on vessels that are brand new. And that gives you like a pretty good picture of, what can we promise new participants in the program? What can we promise them after we annotate some data? Is it worth the investment to annotate data from their boat? And importantly, it makes it so that the data is independent from the training set. So that's part one. Second part is a little bit more technical, but maybe if there's any questions about the split idea, first I could field them. Okay, we're going to charge ahead. So we're going to talk about what are the actual metrics that you use to evaluate a machine learning model. Everybody always says accuracy. That's the easy one, right? You kind of have some picture of what accuracy is. If you show it 100 examples and it gets 99 of them right, it's 99% accurate. For certain kinds of predictions, this doesn't really make any sense. And I'm going to give some examples within fishing of when you actually don't want to use accuracy. Okay, so this is, like I said, accuracy is just the number of correct predictions over all the predictions. What if your data set was 96% albacore? Then your model could just predict albacore 100% of the time. You don't even need a model. You just have a rule that says it's always an albacore, and you get 96% accuracy. So that's a tough situation. One way around it is that you have some kind of class-balanced accuracy, which means that you report accuracy for each class, which would be a species. So you say, my accuracy on albacore is this, on yellowfin is this. That's one way you can kind of get around that. The harder problem is, what if we don't know what this denominator is? What if we don't know what all the predictions are? And this sounds kind of abstract, but I'm gonna show you why this might be true. But one easy example is 24/7 video from EM systems, right? We have a bunch of video. How would you say what your accuracy on albacore is in that video when you don't even know how many albacore there are or how many fish there are? What if there are no fish? What's your accuracy? And so this is somewhere where we need additional metrics. So specifically here, I'm going to divide this into a grid. On the x-axis, so let's start with the y. So on the vertical axis, on the top, we're going to have, there's actually fish in this image. On the bottom, we're going to have, there's no fish in this image. So can we all see that there's a fish up there and no fish down there? Okay, then on the x-axis, going across, we're going to say, on the left, our model predicts there's a fish. We draw a box, we say, we think there's a fish there. So it's clear that in the top one we got it right, and in the bottom one we drew a box around nothing, right? On the right, our model says there's no fish. So it's the opposite. So we get it right on the bottom because there's no fish there. And on the top, now we've missed something. So we have some terminology for this in evaluating systems. The top left would be a true positive because you have predicted a positive, which would mean, yes, there's a fish. I predicted it. And your model was true. Okay? These things, okay, the terms that I'm going to introduce in the next couple slides are a bit unintuitive. It can take a minute to wrap your head around them. So if it doesn't immediately click, that's fine. It takes everybody some time. I'm also going to put these slides up publicly if you ever want to cross-reference. Similarly, in the bottom right, now we have a true negative. Your model predicted this is a negative frame. There's no fish. And it was true, right? There's no fish there. Now we have the two types of errors that your model can make. The bottom left is a false positive. So you predicted a positive, that was false. You think there's a fish there, there's no fish there. The other one is a false negative. You think there's no fish there, but there actually is. So these are different kinds of errors, right? And it's not easy to throw this in the bucket of accuracy because we don't know what the total set of predictions is that we should be making. We could put boxes everywhere. And do we think now that that is the set of things we should evaluate accuracy over? Or should we put no boxes and now accuracy is compared to nothing? So there's two other statistical metrics that are very common to use in cases like this where you don't know your set of predictions. And these are called precision and recall. And actually, this is what we should be using for this kind of computer vision algorithm where you are drawing boxes around things and trying to say whether or not something is in a frame. Okay, precision means how many of my predictions were correct. So you take all of the true positives and the false positives. So those are your predictions. It's where you drew boxes. How many of those are correct? So in this case, we drew 2 boxes. Only one was a fish. So our precision is 50%. Right, so if you were to deploy this algorithm, you would expect that for every 2 boxes you draw, only half of them are really fish. The other question is recall, and that's how many of the real ones did I find? So this is kind of the inverse problem. In this case, the bottom of this formula is how many real ones were there. So in this situation, there were 2 frames with real fish, right? We only predicted a box around 1. And so your recall in this situation is also 50%. You only found half of the real ones. Okay? So in practice, there's a trade-off. So how would you maximize this? How would you get the best possible recall? 100% of the time you find all the fish. You just say every frame is a fish, right? What does that do to your precision? Now your precision's horrible. Now your precision's like 0% or 1% because you've just said there's a bunch of fish and they're not there. So similarly, how would you get the best precision? You would say there's never a fish, right? So now all of your predictions are fine because you have none. But you will never find any of the real ones. And so in practice, there's a trade-off. And so people often plot this. If you like graphs, this is the one for you. There's recall on the x-axis and precision on the y-axis. And you can see as your precision gets better, or rather as your recall gets better, as you find more of the fish, typically your precision goes down. You find more of them, but you also predict some new ones that are not real. And every computer vision system has this problem. And this is always a trade-off that you have to make. You have to decide for your application, do I care more about finding everything, or do I care more about having a bunch of stuff that I predicted wrong, or predicted extra? So in electronic monitoring, for example, if your precision is low, what that means is now you have a bunch of extra video where you've said there's fish, but maybe there's not. And that results in more labor to review that video because you have to double check. Whereas on the other side, if your recall is low, you're probably not finding those rare protected species that you care so much about. Okay, so this is a brief overview of kind of the main metrics for object detection specifically. And the goal isn't to know the math, but it's to know that these are questions that you can ask and to know that one metric usually doesn't capture everything that you want to know about a system. And so you can kind of address this by making sure you ask the right questions. What data was this model trained on? What data was this model tested on? And what metrics are you using to evaluate it and why? And how have you made decisions about the trade-offs between different metrics? Cool. Okay, that's Metrics 101. Thanks. Any questions?
Yeah, I think the gap is for the users or client because we used that method before when we kind of enhanced our system. But then again, our sponsor asked us, what's your accuracy? So
Yeah.
we reported accuracy and precision and the recall. But
Cool.
we highlighted the precision and recall. But then again, they kind of insisted, we want accuracy. So how can you somewhat address that on a layman's term for a client or a user?
Yeah, that's a great question. We run into that all the time too. People just want to hear one single number. They don't want to hear a big trade-off. One thing that people do with precision and recall, if you take the area under this curve, that gives you a pretty good idea of how your trade-off looks in general. Like, if you're able to maintain high precision and high recall, then this thing starts to look like a box with a very high area. That's called mean average precision. I think if you're talking to somebody and you want to kind of communicate, one single number, maybe it's worth an asterisk to say this is what our accuracy is, but like star, it actually means average precision or something like that. If you start, there are other cases where the accuracy does make sense. Like if you're looking at a species classification problem and you want to say, what species is each fish, then accuracy's a good fit. But yeah, I agree that it's a hard problem to figure out how to best communicate these to people.
Thank you so much, Justin. This is Shanyan from Marine Stewardship Council. This is really eye-opening. Thank you so much. You're giving a great example of one fish at a time. I guess you're using multiple screens. In the event of multiple catch at high speed coming through, how do you layer that data on top of being able to identify it as well and then picking up precision? Yeah,
that's a great question. So nothing would really change actually if you had multiple fish on screen. So you could still compute for each box that you predict, was that box around a fish? And you could still say for every fish on the screen, did I put a box there? So it's actually kind of, the metric doesn't really care about how many things are on the screen. It's just sort of summed over all of the boxes that you drew and all of the real boxes. Does that answer the question? Okay, cool.
Thanks, Kay and Fris. I'm Aribisha from Greenpeace. I just want to have a question on the quality of data. Because I think, yes, we have so many data, but however, I just want to ask how many we can exercise the data elimination, because we want really focus on the data that are really good in quality, so we can put in any models, right? Whether the data elimination in the beginning is part of our consideration, so how far we consider the quality of data, not always about the quantity. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. How should we consider the quality of data as we're adding it to our data sets? I think it's a tough question. I think you don't just want to pick the nicest looking data, because if you train your model on the data that all looks really pretty and clear conditions and it's sunny and the fish is visible, that's not where you're going to be deploying the model. You kind of need to take into account the fact that you're going to encounter tough things in the future. And so any kind of data that is low quality but is sort of doable, say for a human reviewer, that's actually very valuable for you. Because you can train the model then to deal with things like fog, to deal with weather, to deal with water on the lens, with nighttime imagery, things like that. So yeah, in terms of like data that looks nice being, if that's what you're talking about with data quality, that's kind of how I'd answer that question. Similarly, like, you don't necessarily want to train your model on something that a human couldn't even review, because it's probably just not going to get you anywhere. Cool, thanks for the questions. I think we're going to introduce actually our 4 speakers, and then we're going to maybe take some more questions after that. Let's maybe take a minute to put some chairs up here, and then I'll introduce our amazing speakers for the Emerging Opportunities Lightning Round in about a minute. Cool. Okay, I forgot to put all the bios in one place, so please be patient as I search my email. First, I'd like to welcome Fareed Maroof. He is a seasoned global development professional, has led Southeast Asia programs for renowned organizations like USAID, World Bank, and the Grameen Foundation. His expertise lies in digital innovations for natural resource management, seafood supply chains, poverty alleviation, and ICT 4D initiatives. Fareed has had a bunch of presentations and sessions during SAFET, so we're very pleased to welcome him up to the stage. Actually, is it weird if the chairs are a bit in the way? We have slides for people. Maybe we'll, sorry. We could just scoot them, yeah.
Slides, yeah?
Yeah, do you want to do your slides?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I should, oh, well.
Which is somewhere in the back? Right, okay, thank you very much. Hi, yeah, I'm just going to go through this very quickly. I think because we probably have more interesting thing to discuss later on when we sit in the chair. So I currently work for, you said SUFIA TS. It's kind of portfolio of RDMA, Regional USA project. My project is finished in 2025. These are the components, but I just want to highlight that I work especially on the number 2, adoption, fair labor, sustainable fishing practices through the technology. In this subject, my major goal is spearheading the digital transformation among fisheries, driving AI, ML, AA adoption in 11 countries in Southeast Asia plus Pacific countries. In the area of fair labor, IUU, sustainable fishing practices. So we have some work here that we, one of them, we have regional study on AI/ML later today at 2 o'clock by our consultant, Stuart Green, that had a very excellent presentation yesterday. And some of the rest will be done throughout the project. I think one thing I would like to also explain that I found out that fishery sectors kind of like late entrance in the technology compared to other sectors. You might not disagree, but in this region, that's the most characteristic I found out. I think fisheries also kind of an old business. You know, the small-scale fishers, their kids want to go to building app, fintechs, rather than become fishers. Also, I think if you remember back into a few years back, where people talking about traceability, and then there's wave of hype of blockchains, for example. There's one representative from one of the country in ASEAN came to me and asking, what is blockchain? Is that blockchain the new requirement from Europe, like a catch documentation scheme? That's how they understand technology. So I want to bring them to be one of the first one that ride this wave, the AI, by participating, improve knowledge, and also bringing the technology to come to the fishery sectors. There's money here. Why I say that? Because you heard some of companies in aquaculture make millions of raise funding. I know some of the rainmakers, and I asked them to come to fisheries. They said there's no money in capture fisheries. They said there's no money in capture fisheries. So I think this is something that we want to make sure there's that when AI moving, the AI train moving, we are all together, and we will be part of the progress that we are heading. I think AI is much bigger than blockchain. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Fareed. Next, I'm going to introduce Hugh Thomas. Hugh has a career spanning nearly 30 years in the seafood world. He's recognized as a thought leader in the evolving world that seafood sustainability programs sit. Brings a unique perspective and insight to supply chain risks, mitigation, and certification efforts. He's going to talk to us about his work at Global Fishing Watch on Vessel Viewer. Please welcome Hugh.
Thank you. So as a consultant to Global Fishing Watch, I was asked to come and look at how Global Fishing Watch could engage with industry, because as I think you know, as an organisation, they've really focused on transparency and shining a light on ocean data, which really leads to capacity building at government level. And so they've developed several models and tools for government inspectors, and they asked me a couple of years ago to come and say, what is it that Global Fishing Watch could do with industry? They had a tool that had already been developed called Vessel Viewer. One of the challenges that seafood supply chain owners have is the number of vessels that they have to deal with. As an example, there's a UK processor who supplies retailers around the world. They have 3,500 vessels that operate within their supply chain on an annual basis. To understand the risks within those is a bit of a challenge. And so what we've been trying to do from a Global Fishing Watch point of view is take the one-by-one vessel view that they give port inspectors who are looking at 10 or 20 or 100 vessels a day coming in and deciding which ones to look at, how we can scale that and give the opportunity for seafood buyers to get their arms around the data sets. Global Fishing Watch actually works with data sets that are global. It's based upon algorithms and machine learning against those data sets, and so they've got 21 global data sets they pull from and take the information through. And what we're trying to do with Vessel Viewer really is give the opportunity for supply chain owners to put up fleets and groups of vessels and understand some of those risks within them. The risks will not be an underwriting, a warranting or certifying of their supply chains. These are the vessels you probably need to have a closer look at. If you've got 100 vessels in the fleet or 200 in the fleet, these are the ones that we can see, these are the ones that we can do. The data sets are not perfect. There's lots of work to be done, but quite simply what we've got here is, who the vessels are, where they are, what they've been doing, what we can see about them, and then some of the risks and some of the veracity checks of, are they authorised to fish, are they going into marine protected areas? We can't tell you as it stands with some of the data sets whether they're licensed to go into marine protected areas, but that's one of the opportunities that we can get more data to come in to improve it. And so what we've done is we've taken Vessel Viewer and the core data sets that Global Fishing Watch have done. We've integrated them because they had 6 separate entry points for the individual government tools that they developed. And we're trying to overlay that data. And so the opportunity then is we use the same common data set for fisheries inspectors, for supply chain owners, for insurance companies, finance companies, and present it to them in the way that they want it, so we can then build up additional data sets. As I've put here, there's machine learning and algorithms, which is why we're invited to talk. Vessel Viewer is going to be launched publicly on the 26th of October. It's still a beta test. We know that there's issues. We know that there's going to be lots of places where people will put vessels in and not getting the information that they want. But of course, part of that is to try and get them to get that data so you can then put it back in and develop it forward. So hopefully that's an example of a practical application of AI and machine learning that Global Fishing Watch is using. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you, Hugh. Next up is Dr. Nadia Mamuzadeh, who is a senior scientist at Michigan State University and specializes in the application of genomic techniques to fisheries management and seafood traceability. Please welcome Nadia.
Hi everyone, I'm Nadia Mamuzadeh. I'm the geneticist who snuck into an AI session. I wanted to share about our iCatch technology, which uses both genomics and AI to conduct visual and genetic species identification. And our goal is really to offer a technology that allows for smart species identification to solve pressing species ID problems throughout seafood supply chains. So iCatch has two integrated components. The one component is a smartphone app that uses AI to conduct visual identification from user-supplied photos, and this works very much like some existing apps like iNaturalist. The other component of iCatch are prepackaged rapid genomic test kits that allow users to genetically identify species from swab samples. So this works very analogously to a home test for COVID-19 and can be used to test anything that has DNA on it, so a whole fish, fins, fillets. But unlike existing technologies, iCatch combines both these AI and genomic elements into one integrated technology. So I just wanted to share really quickly about how the iCatch species identification process works. It starts with using a photo and supplying it to the app to conduct this visual identification step. If that can't be done sufficiently, then you're guided through the genomic testing process. So you grab your kit, collect a swab sample, add that swab to some prepackaged reagents, and then that goes onto a test strip. Those steps are very much like the home test for COVID-19. Maybe they look a little familiar. And then the last kind of unique piece of iCatch is the results of the genomic testing are then uploaded to the cloud and integrated into our AI model. And so in that way, we're combining our genomic and artificial intelligence elements and using the results of our genomic testing to allow our model to learn over time. And so I'm going to leave you with these big picture ideas. If you want to learn more about iCatch, you can check out our website. You can scan the QR code. Our goal is to allow species identification to happen in areas where it's historically been fairly challenging in seafood and fisheries, seafood supply chains, fisheries applications. iCatch can allow fast species identification. For example, the genomic test can give you results in under 30 minutes. They're highly accurate using both the genomic and visual information. Easy to use, which makes them field ready, which is critical for fisheries applications, and also cost effective. I just wanted to say I'm also giving a longer talk next door after the break, so you could learn more in there. And then our contact info is at the top right. All right, thank you.
Awesome, thank you, Nadia. Finally, we have Eric Enotam, who is the co-founder and CEO of This Fish, a Vancouver-based company providing software and artificial intelligence to the seafood industry. Eric is considered a leader in global seafood traceability, having pioneered a consumer tracing app for seafood in 2011, and now pioneering the adoption of machine learning and computer vision technologies in seafood processing. Please welcome Eric.
Great. Thanks a lot. Let's see here. Oh, there we are. Yeah, so we're not actually focused on the harvesting side out at sea, but actually what happens to the fish once it hits the shore. So we've developed software called Tally that basically allows seafood processing companies to digitize quality control, production, inventory, all sorts of different type of workflows. So we're capturing a lot of data. A lot of it is captured just manually, replacing paper with a tablet computer. We can also link into different hardware, whether it's scales or automated equipment, and we're just starting to use cameras as well in the processing sector. So where can AI benefit this sector? Oh, I think I'm missing slides. Oh, there we are. So this is basically the workflows that we are digitizing from port unloading through production, inventory, and shipping. And in general, there are kind of three areas where our software and AI in particular can help, and that's really around efficiency and labor costs. And there's a real labor shortage both globally. Whether you're in Canada or the Philippines or Thailand, it's hard to recruit workers into the seafood processing sector. Secondly, around process control, about 70 to 80% of a finished seafood product is the actual raw material. So better tracking that raw material can have huge savings. And then finally, around compliance, making sure that you're reporting accurately to regulators, to certifiers, et cetera. So we've developed a number of applications. Our core application is Tally, the software. We have Tally BI, which is business intelligence. So we hear a lot about AI at this conference, not too much about BI. But you'd be surprised how many companies have very poor data analytics just looking at their historic data. And then TallyBot is basically our AI that we can program with a machine learning algorithm to predict and classify things going on in production. And then Tally Vision is our computer vision. And so so we're running a lot of different experiments in the processing sector. On labor costs, I would say the Tally Vision we're using for automated continuous inspection in fish processors. So instead of having somebody there manually, randomly sort of sampling quality, you can use computer vision to classify fish fillets, measure them, count them, identify defects on fish fillets, or for instance, most companies, when they have a finished good, they have to do inspections on the labeling. Is the labeling correct? So there is a lot of potential for computer vision in the processing sector just because there is a lot of visual inspection. And that's more or less around labor saving. In the process control, we've developed yield prediction models. So even for a tuna cannery, for instance, and a salmon processor in Canada, so even before you start processing your fish, we can predict what the yield is based on your historic production. We're also starting to do work on this. It seems like an esoteric problem. It's drain weight prediction in tuna canneries. So the US is now moving towards a drain weight where legally when you produce a can of tuna and you say the drain weight is 100 grams, when you drain the liquid out of it, it's got to be 100 grams. And a lot of tuna canneries can't get that accurately, so it means they have to put 105 or 107. And in a tuna cannery, depending on the scale, 1 extra gram can be from $250,000 to $1 million in raw material costs. So we're developing a drain weight prediction model to better understand the drain weights in production. And on the compliance side, that's really about looking at outliers and anomalies. So we're doing some work on anomaly detection. So basically, looking at all your production, quality data, supply chain data, are there anomalies in it to suggest maybe there are data errors or maybe fraudulent activity going on? So I think that there is a lot of potential for AI, and that one of the reasons is because there's a lot of natural variability in seafood. And it's very hard for processors to predict production and quality outcomes. So if you generate huge data volumes over 2-3 year period, we can better predict those production outcomes and quality outcomes. So I'm pretty enthusiastic about the opportunity, but it's going to take a lot of training and getting people to understand what AI is. So thank Jay for this kind of AI 101 session. Thanks.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, everybody. We're a little bit over time, but I think we have time for a couple questions. So, yeah, I'll open up to the audience. Do we have a microphone for the back?
I promise I can project.
Okay.
My question is about eye-catch.
Sure.
Are you working with any law enforcement agencies?
Yeah, that's actually our #1 market right now is law enforcement. Because really what we're doing is, I don't know if I'm projecting as loud as you are. Thanks. Yeah, we are talking a lot with law enforcement agencies, particularly at the federal level. Maybe one way that we're a little bit different from a lot of the technology that's been presented is we're not necessarily on the water doing the type of EM on deck monitoring, but we have been working closely with law enforcement programs who have import exports, for example, single specimens, groups of specimens where they need to be able to verify compliance with import-export laws. So yeah, that's been a really informative sector for us to think about.
I have a question for you too. Hang on. How much is that little fish COVID test cost?
You're going to hate my answer. It depends. For some of the species that we're currently developing iCatch for, there's a lot of existing resources that we can take advantage of. And so our first step is really a data mining step, existing photo data sets, such as the one that Justin described earlier, actually. And on the same side, on the genetic side, same thing, thinking about what genetic data are available. So if there are more resources available, we can develop our tech faster, and it's a lot cheaper to do. If we have to start from scratch, then it takes longer, and it's also more expensive. But our goal is to make it affordable for seafood supply chain actors, and we know that our tests will be much, much cheaper than the current DNA sequencing testing that they are doing now.
Any other questions? I have another one.
So my question to all of the speakers. So since yesterday we know that there is a lot of technologies and systems. So in the future, can you see or can we integrate all of the system become once, because every time we bring new technologies and system and then we add more work to the fishing community, especially for the small scale fisheries, and then we add more work for them. Do you think that there is a possibility to integrate one of the system and then they become one connection to each other? How you see it in the future for the technologies and system?
Yeah, I'm going to answer this from high level first. So, I mean, when I was with USAID Oceans, one of the main goals for our work is actually to create interoperability among ECD2 solution, because that's where everybody's playing on the level, same level. Hard, right, to have interoperability. That means they can play together. So I think the AI could probably also solve that problem one day. You know, because maybe the requirement of data to be structured, to be transformed in a certain way for other application, maybe will be reduced. That's my vision. The other thing is that also inclusivity. I mean, when you create this application, you have to inclusive as much as possible people. The loop between the one who send the data till they receive the benefit of data currently still long. You do port sampling, you do catch documentation, and then it goes to some journal and then become regulation, and then how that go back directly to the small scale fishers, for example, I think it's still long. So I think if you can shorten this loop, everybody can play easily, and then the technology will support that. That's a very high level, probably technical. Somebody want to answer?
I don't know if you saw my presentation yesterday on the global dialogue on seafood traceability, but that's one of the opportunities in that it provides a common language of nomenclature, what people need to know, and then how that information is digitized so it can be shared interoperably through compatible systems. And one of the things I highlighted on the slide is that Global Fishing Watch has made sure that they've standardized the nomenclature so it fits the GDST standards where there are key data elements that are relevant, and that's part of the dialogue process going forward. And all their APIs are GDST compliant, so that third-party users that want to draw down their data, it'll be in a way that's in an interoperable way so it can be ingested and shared. So the standard is there. Quite honestly, it just needs to be adopted across the hardware and software companies so that information can be shared seamlessly.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, the holy grail is to have full electronic traceability from boat to plate, but there's actually a surprising few examples of it around the world. I think GDST is definitely going to help, but you know, it's also about the business model, about, you know, rewarding harvesters who are sharing their data, being more transparent. So I think that, you know, the industry still has a long way to go in terms of their behaviors, not necessarily the technology. We can, you know, we don't have one example, for instance, that where we're connecting our software from the dock to an e-logbook, for instance. So, but there's nothing technically that's stopping that. It's more around, I think, people's attitude and behavior.
Okay, I think maybe one more.
Thank you, Arif Shah from Greenpeace. Thank you for all speakers. I have a question for Hugh and Pak Farid. For Hugh, I know that's really global fishing world is the revolutionize the system of the monitoring, controlling, and surveillance. So I just want to ask about, because we know at the time that Indonesia also part of this, we can show easily the VMS, but is there any gap or maybe the legal challenge or maybe the political challenge that you find out so far, how to deal with that when we want to encourage the governments to use the global fishing world and sharing their VMS data? For Pak Farid, it's really on the, because we know this, our region is quite diverse in culture, local wisdom, and so many local wisdom that our small-scale fishers have. So how far the SUFIA TS also can consider and bring those local wisdom that maybe there are good ideas, good practices there. So maybe it's good maybe to consider, but I do think maybe you already considered that one, but just if you could elaborate more on that side, will be great. Thank you.
So there's two parts. One was about VMS sharing, and then one was about bringing small-scale fishing. Is that correct? Yeah. In terms of data sharing, so Global Fishing Watch has built its models and tools set on AIS, which is publicly available. There's an increasing number of countries. I think there's 12 countries now that share VMS data with Global Fishing Watch. I'm not sure if Marcelo's sat in the audience from FIA PNG, but they, as an industry group, actually came and said, we want to share our VMS data, and went to the National Fisheries Authority in Papua New Guinea and said, can you please share our VMS data? They could see that something like Vessel Viewer was going to come along, was going to shine a light to retailers and brands, and potentially lower their perceived risk. Because there was more information available. And so I think one of the opportunities we have as we're getting supply chain actors, brands and retailers to use something like Vessel Viewer to look at their insights will be the advocacy to governments to say, why shouldn't you be sharing some of this data? Now, I recognise that there's challenges in terms of confidentiality, commerciality. So we're also exploring how access can be given to historic data sets from industry that can continue to be used for machine learning and algorithm development. And so we're exploring with some industry groups about historic FAD data, e-logbook data that's maybe 3 or 5 years old, so it's not commercially sensitive anymore, that can be used. And then, as I explained yesterday, there's a big focus on small-scale fleets. The Sustainable Development Goals have got the Leave No One Behind agenda within them. Global Fishing Watch has now got a small-scale fishery team that's being developed with a biodiversity team to support communities, and that is looking at exploring different models. I don't think it's clear what that journey is yet, and there's probably going to be some failure. When Vessel View was first developed and launched, we beta tested it with 10 industry partners, and there was an understanding that they may have said this is a complete crock of rubbish. It doesn't work. Thankfully, they didn't say that, and so we can move forward. But governments have their part to play. I think it's increasingly difficult for governments to sit there and say we're not going to share VMS data. You've got Latin American countries, you've got Asian countries, Pacific, European. I think that ship has sailed.
Thank you. Yeah, going to be very quick. So yeah, culture is very important for us here, especially when we're dealing with small-scale fishers. I think you understand that. That's why we interested on how the actually AI could help this, right? I think one of the solutions that we work together that will be displayed on the last day tomorrow is about to use our AI chatbot to ask something like, how is it actually to handle post-harvest tuna? What element? And then you can drill down. For example, what regulation to read that? Something like that. So in their own language. And then it can answer it. So this is something. I remember back in 2018 or 19 when we have the SAFET in Bangkok, we also do some hackathon. One of the winners actually doing catch documentation using chat. The AI word is not there yet. So basically they're asking series of questions, which is more familiar with the small scale, rather than form, button, and so forth. So these cultures very important for the region. So we take seriously. Thank you. You want to add something about the culture?
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, for the questions, and thanks to our awesome speakers for the overview and, yeah, very interesting discussion. Yeah, thank you all for coming and for sticking around for the whole thing. I hope everybody learned something and this can spark some discussions, and yeah, feel free to come talk to us anytime. Thanks so much.